Hello, and thank you for
Okay.
joining us for another episode of Addiction Talk, where we're telling powerful stories of people in recovery or who have struggled with addiction, and in hopes of inspiring someone tonight to either get help or to know that there is hope for a loved one. Take a listen to the story of my guest for tonight. Ariana Ruiz has made a name for herself as a TikTok influencer, attracting millions of followers by sharing her cooking videos, Hispanic culture, and life as a mother. It was an overdose that led her to rehab for a cocaine addiction, a journey she openly shared for the first time last year with her TikTok followers. Today, she's inspiring others to live a drug-free life. Addiction Talk starts now. Well, we're excited to have Ariana here tonight with us to be able to share her story. Thank you for joining us, Ariana. We are really excited to be able to share just your inspiration tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. When this came across in my emails, I said, I want to do this. I'm excited to come out and share with everyone. So it's very exciting. Thank you.
Yeah, I know for someone like yourself who has been in the limelight to some extent, you're a TikTok influencer, nearly 3 million followers. But for so long, we've seen you as this cooking guru, someone who shared a lot about your culture. But only most recently have you shared what you've been struggling with or what you'd struggle with. What made you say now is the time to start sharing more than just cooking and what I'm really going through?
Um, I would say that it was the first time that I started to actually like feel confident in everything because I had been struggling for a while and um, I want to say that there was a lot of shame and guilt in being in addiction, going to rehab. You know, people would ask me where I was, what I was doing, and it was just shameful to me. And I felt like I was at the point in my life where I was acceptive of it. And I think that so many people struggle with it and they struggle with the courage to talk about it. So I think that my platform is, although it's food related, I think that it is a huge opportunity to help other people.
Mhm. And when, we hear that a lot where people talk about the shame or the stigma. What was the fear of how your fans would see you? What were you concerned about?
I was concerned that they might see me as um, to put it plain and simple, a drug addict. I feel like there's so much stigma around that word in general. When I was in active addiction in real life, I would go to the hospital for overdosing, whatever it was. And in real life, those people were just treated you very badly. You're strung out, you're on this, you're on that. And they just treat you very badly. So, on the internet to come out and say it and be open with it, I was feeling like that was the reaction that I would also get.
Mhm. Were you afraid maybe that you would lose some of your followers? Like you said, just going through active addiction and seeing how, even in some medical situations, how people treated you. Unfortunately, that should never happen. But seeing that, were you concerned that people would not see you as this? I mean, a lot of people look up to you, they follow you. Was that a concern as well?
Yes, that was a huge concern. That maybe people would like shun me, losing followers for sure, shun me, see me in a different light, basically. I have like, there's this whole image I think a lot of social media people portray, and behind closed doors it's can be completely different. You don't really know what's going on. So
Mhm. No, I think that's very true because when we think about you, you always look happy. When we see you cooking on there, we see you with your daughters, and you just look like you're living your best life. But tell me what was going on behind the scenes during some of those times, where people were like, "Where are you?" or "What's going on?" What was going on for you?
So what was going on for me, I would get those comments that are like, I might have popped up here and there with like a few advertisements, but I feel like that's what my page was becoming, just like a little few ads here and there, here and there. At the time, my following was not nearly as big as it is now, but it was still pretty big, about 500,000, I would say. So, I still was getting these partnerships. And so people were noticing and people were commenting like, where's the food recipes? Where are these videos? And I'm just like, yeah, it's gonna come soon. Like I'm working on it. And at this point it was like me very, very badly in active addiction. A little bit later when I did go to rehab, it was the same thing because your phone gets taken away in the first 30 days. And so I couldn't even do those advertisements. So a lot of people were kind of questioning where I had been, what I was doing. And I was just making up stuff, like just making up things as we go. Um,
So, what got you to the point you mentioned that you had overdosed? I know that, people may not know this, but your drug of choice was cocaine primarily, some alcohol in there. What was life like for you? How bad did it get for you?
like growing up or like in
Using your addiction, because I know, of course, you mentioned you'd been in the
yeah,
hospital and different things like
yeah.
that. Well, take me through what life was like, during those times.
Okay. It got pretty bad because at home, I was, still there. I had my family, I had my kids to think about. The relationship wasn't going great. There was a few little, at home details that were kind of, pushing me out to seek drugs and alcohol. And it became to the point where, I wouldn't come home for days. I
Hmm.
I was just, on benders. I was living in my car because the situation at home had gotten so bad. And it just fueled the fire. It fueled the fire as far as like being angry, being sad, being mad. And since also in person, it's very hard to reach out to people and say, hey, I'm struggling with this, I'm struggling with drinking. My family had kind of soonly learned from at the time, my ex-husband, they had kind of learned, what I was doing, not all the details, but a little bit of what I was doing. So, they were trying to kind of intervene. And I was just gone. I was just living in my car, going to the bar. This is right when in Texas, COVID was one of the first places to open up bars. So I was there and I would go alone. That was embarrassing all in itself. I'd be there alone, but it just um, it just snowballed. It started off small. It started off me going, an hour and come back. And then it started to be a couple hours and all nighter and then days. So it just snowballed into just a huge problem for me to where like I think I was so in denial about it. I'm there living in my car and I'm like, man, this is not so bad. Like I'm telling myself, but like in reality, thinking about it now, it was bad. It was very bad.
Mhm. So you would go, like you said, days at a time where you wouldn't come home. I know you mentioned going to the bars. How did the cocaine come into play as well?
So the first time I actually ever tried cocaine, I was about 16. I was 16.
Mm.
And I remember being very scared. I remember it was around me and I was like, I'm not touching that, no way. But everyone was like, everyone, like as cliche, everyone was doing it. And I said, okay, right? And it was like the moment I did it, I was like, I like this. It became a huge problem, huge as a teenager. So, fast forward a little bit and I get pregnant around 18, 19, I think I got pregnant. And I quit everything. So, from there, I was just clean. Later on, when all that stuff came into play, remember how I said it snowballed. So at first I was drinking. And I would see cocaine around me. It would be, at the parties, at the bars, popping out here, you want some? And, I would say no. And I would look at it like a big cheeseburger in retrospect, like looking at like I want that, but I know what it does to me. I want that, but I cannot have it because I know where this is going to lead to. And eventually one night I was so drunk that oh well, I'll do it. And I
Mm.
did. And, when I did, like I said, it was back to square one. Like when I had first ever tried it, it was, I love this. I need this. I need more. And more was never enough. More was never enough.
So what let you get to the point? Because you start at 16, you talk about somebody, you're at a party, which I think is a wake-up call for a lot of parents. You're at a party, you're around other young people. They're like, everybody's trying it, so you try it. Fast forward, you're trying to stay away from it, throughout your life. But then that one time, just using again, sends you into a spiral. At what point did you feel I need to get help? What was that wake up call for you? Because I know you also said there was this denial component to it.
Hmm. When I knew I needed help, I remember the day it was the day I overdosed. And it was the day I was sitting there in my kitchen. And I think it was probably like 7 in the morning. And I had been up from the night before. And it's like 7 in the morning. I'm there all alone. This was like normal for me, right? So I'm all alone and I'm doing it. And all of a sudden I'm like it hurts, like, and I know something's wrong. I know I've done a lot and I still had a lot left. And I stopped, and I've never said, "Oh, I'm going to throw this away." You know what I mean? Like, as a drug addict, you just, that's yours, and you don't want anything to happen to, whatever it is you're using. And I stopped in that moment, and I went to the toilet, and I threw it in there, and I flushed it, because I knew that I would not, as much as my chest was hurting, I knew I would not have the willpower to stop, and that it was probably going to end. But it was honestly already too late, because I had to call 911. They
Wait,
had
so
to
you
come.
called 911 on your own as you're realizing you're overdosing?
Hmm. I called 911, and they came and got me, and everything was already like it hurt so bad, but everything was already like blacking out, and I had to call them. And at the point that they got there, they were like, "How much did you take? How much did you take?" And I'm like, "I don't know." I'm throwing out a number of how much I spent. And I remember them like, "Well, how many in weight?" Well, and I'm like, I don't know this. They're asking me all these questions while I'm already like overdosing. And then so they put me in there, and at this point too, all my muscles had locked. Everything, I couldn't, my wrist, everything was tightened like this. My legs were contorted, like just locked in place. And I see, as in that moment, everyone in the truck is just going fast, and the fact that I couldn't move, and I'm just looking around as kind of like the lights going out, and I'm thinking, this is it, this
So
is
you
it.
thought you
And
were dying in that moment.
I did, and the way that they were moving was panicking me even more. The fact that I couldn't move was panicking me, and I just said, "This is it."
And so when you realized, I know that had to be, very scary for you, Ariana, and I'm so grateful that you're alive and you're with us today. To be able to share that there's hope on the other side of this, because when you were in the midst of that and you came out of it, they were able to revive you and you didn't die. Um, was it at that very moment that you like, I have to go get help? I have to go to treatment?
Yes, it was. And ironic as it is, I had already seeked out about 1 week prior. I had seeked out to someone on TikTok, which is ironic, right? Because that's the platform I was on. And I had seen someone post something that he was like somebody who gets, if you're struggling, he gets you in touch with rehab centers and this and that. And so I messaged him, and he messaged me back. So I already had his number, and he was already like he kept on calling me. And at that point I had already kind of ignored him for that week, because I was like, nah, I changed my mind, because I was still continuing to use. And within that week, the overdose happened, and I messaged him, and I was like, "Hey, I need to get in here." The next day, he's like, "We need to get you in fast, because if not, I'm gonna ignore him again." And the same thing. It's a general occurrence with addicts. And so I think he got me in there like the next day. I got on a flight. I actually missed the first flight. I was really scared, and I missed the first flight. He rescheduled it the next day. I got shipped off, and I went to California in Laguna, and I did a detox center there.
Mhm. So thinking about that, what were you really the most scared of? Because I think that's a lot of fear for people who may be watching this who are struggling. Like you said, you had called a week before. So it was on your mind. And then you have this moment where you're like, okay, I'm going to get help. But then you're like, no, I'm not going to get help. So what do you feel like was the fear of going to treatment? What was that concern for you?
The fear, plain and simple, honestly, was not having the drugs, because at this point I was every day I was doing them. And so it was the fact of, the feeling when you don't have it for a little bit and you're angry and you're agitated and you have so much anxiety. That fear like consumed me of not having it. And I just ignored him. I was, no. And I remember the morning I overdosed, I messaged my dad asking him about the insurance and kind of telling them what was going on. So it was
And once
scary.
you finally got to rehab, because you did make that courageous choice, which I'm glad you did, that you made that courageous choice, even though, I think that just shows your tenacity, because you missed the flight, but the guy stayed on it, and you finally got there. When you finally got there, what was it really like compared to the misconceptions? Excuse me.
So I am going to be honest that I was very fortunate that I had insurance, because I got into
Sorry.
I was very fortunate that I had insurance, because I got into a very, honestly, it was a very great place as far as mental health, as far as the place itself. Um, I'm sorry, I was hearing something, but yeah, I think it was way better than I thought it was going to be honest. So I was thinking it was going to be like in retrospect, like jail. Like that's what I kind of felt like it was going to be like jail. And in a way, like it has its little things where you can't have your phone, you're monitored. But as far as like the actual help that you're getting, as far as the counseling, it was amazing. And I love that I went, because I would not be here right now if I hadn't gone.
Yes, I think that's huge. Sorry, everyone. I got a tickle in my throat right there, but I, have really been listening to what you've been saying, Ariana. And I think what's so powerful about that is that, as you said, once you got into treatment, it was so impactful for you. It was the change that started you on a better trajectory. What do you feel that you learned about yourself in treatment and about addiction that was so life changing for you?
I learned that I'm not always right. And that was very hard. That was very hard, because I've always thought in my mind, my way of thinking was one way and I was right. And nobody can change my mind, right? So when you go in there, you have to hear other people's opinions and their like ways of thinking. So you got to change your way of thinking. You also have to accept, what's happened in the past. You have to accept the things you've done. You have to take like accountability, basically, you got to take accountability. So just changing your way of thinking was the hardest thing, but it wasn't until then. I was 26 when I went, 25, 26 when I went. I think it was 26, sorry. And 25, I'm so sorry. I was 25 when I was in there. And at that point in my life, I had already thought I knew everything. No one could tell me anything. And once I changed my way of thinking and kind of even felt for others, instead of thinking, that they were just out to get me or the worst, having empathy, I learned a lot of things in there.
And so, what is life like in recovery today? Because your journey has been kind of interesting. Because I know at one point you stopped the drugs, but you were still drinking some, like you thought you could still manage that. But now you're at a point that you realize that you can't do anything. You can't do any of that. So, tell me about your journey and your shift, because I think a lot of people, they do come out of rehab and they go, oh, well, I'm not doing the drugs and I can maybe drink time to time and I'll be okay. So, how did you start to really get to your transformation of recovery?
So that's so funny, because I think that that's something in a lot of our minds. When you go through the program, they say like, oh, I switched to beer, and there's all these little things that people. What is that? Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry. Outside my apartment, it's very loud. So there's all these little things that people think are still okay. Oh, maybe it's a glass of wine, maybe it's a few beers on game day, But if you're somebody who, is prone to addiction, you've gone through it, then you know that it's not just so easy to stop. So you may go out one day and say, I'm just going to have a glass of wine. But then you may end up, it's 3 a.m. and you've drinking 3 bottles of wine, 2 bottles of wine, whatever it is. And I think that was something I kind of had to learn the hard way because, I was like, yeah, I'm not doing cocaine anymore. I can just drink. But it was still, in the end, putting me in positions where they just didn't end up well. And so, yeah, now I've joined AA meetings again that I've been going to, and I love it. I love the people I've met. I keep myself accountable, but also, the support system I have there also, helps keep me that I'm going, and I love it.
No, I think that's big because a lot of people do think, like you said, well, I'm not doing the cocaine, it's better, not realizing the addiction part of it. And for you to have that awakening to say, okay, I know now I have to quit everything to get in a position that I can really live this life of sobriety. And now that you're there, how does it feel?
Now that I'm here, it feels great. I want to say it's definitely not as bad as when I went to rehab as far as like resetting my mind because the whole feelings things comes up again. But it was not. I'm telling you, it was nothing compared to my time in rehab because I wasn't drinking so much, but I was drinking, and it still altered my mind and the chemical balance in my brain. So when I first stopped drinking again, it messed me up. I was feeling like depressed. I was feeling very tired. All of those, kind of little symptoms you get when you stop something. So um, I remember getting like kind of angry and frustrated easily again. And that in itself was a huge wake up call because, I need to go back and learn again how to like just manage these emotions and go and do healthy things like, maybe it's a walk, maybe it's meditating. So yeah.
Mhm. And I think what you touched on there was really important about the emotional connection to the addiction. When you look back, starting at 16 and just different things, how much do you think your mental health played in you turning to the substances?
I think it played a huge part in it. So I didn't get diagnosed with a few mental illnesses until I was a bit older. And it just kind of, you know, goes back to when I was way younger. And like talking to a therapist now and kind of looking back, I had been doing a lot of these things. I had basically had these mental illnesses since I was, a young child slash teen, whatever. And so I never got help. It was kind of swept under the rug. It was swept under the rug because, when you're a teenager, especially, I think you get kind of labeled by your parents. It's just a difficult teen. It's just this, making kind of excuses instead of like looking into the deeper roots of why they're acting out, why they're doing these things. And, I, like I said, when I got pregnant and I just stopped everything completely, I swept all of the emotional things that were kind of like all of the emotional things that were getting blocked by the drugs and the alcohol, those got swept away too. So I remember right after I had my first child, I had to seek therapy because I those mental illnesses came back into play. So this is when I found out I had PTSD from my childhood and some experiences.
Mm.
So this is yeah, when I found out I had that, and I go in there and she basically explained to me that when your life changes a little bit, that you're going to when your life changes a little bit, like well, having a kid, moving, stuff like that, it can trigger your PTSD. So those mental health illnesses definitely played a big part when I got older because I was sweeping everything. I didn't talk about it. I didn't acknowledge any of those feelings or things that happened to me as a young child. So everything was coming back up later on. And that was just the beginning. That was
Wow.
just the beginning.
That is very interesting because, we know that addiction, mental health and addiction often go hand in hand. That a lot of people, when they're struggling, whether that be depression or things like that, that that they do turn to that as a can be a coping mechanism. So how are you coping now? I know you said, you talked to a therapist. What other things have you found that have helped you in processing those emotions that you could share with other people that may be beneficial for them tonight?
So I personally really like art. Another thing, of course, you guys kind of know is like that I love cooking. I love editing. I used to do audio video production, so editing videos and making my food content is what I love. I've just recently got more into the audio part of it. So although I don't, show any of that, that's something that I like to do all by myself and create music. So those are some of the things I like. I also like going to the park. I just moved to Austin, Texas. So there's so many like nice little rivers at the park. Like nature. Nature is very, very soothing for me.
Mhm.
Um,
So you just found these other outlets. I love it. Art, you get to express yourself. We've seen your cooking videos. And if you have not watched Ariana's cooking videos, you need to go check them out because it will definitely make you hungry. You give all kind of good recipes there. So I could see that cooking, finding other ways to express yourself. And I'm sure that's been very powerful. So as we wrap up your interview, I want to just ask you a few more questions because we really want to leave some golden nuggets with
yeah.
those who are watching tonight. So,
Mhm.
first, what would you say has been the best piece of advice that you've received on this sobriety journey of yours that's been the most helpful?
I know this one, and I'm so excited to share it. Even if you didn't ask, I was gonna ask if I could say it anyway. So I would say it is not letting other people define who you are, not letting other people make that their assumptions, judging you off of what they think you are, what you were. That plays such a huge part in us, in the shame and guilt. It's a snowball, keep going. So as long as you know who you are, you're a good person, you're trying, um, there's always a way. And yeah, don't listen to those negative people and negative thoughts.
No, I think that's huge. And people here are saying you're such an inspiration. Thank you so much for being open about your experiences. I've seen all the comments coming in. So I know that you're really inspiring people. And I think that's huge because for so long you said it was the stigma or the shame that kind of kept you so secret about it. But once you were willing to say, hey, I know I'm having a problem, you reached out to somebody on TikTok, which is amazing. And it just shows the importance, Ariana, I think of platforms like yourself or people who are open to talking about this because it lets one more person feel like they're not alone. So when you think about what you hope people learn from your story, what do you hope when people look at Ariana, the TikTok influencer who has inspired millions of people, but who's also been very open for the first time about her addiction? What do you hope they walk away with?
I hope that they walk away with no matter what you're struggling with, no matter where you're at in life, it always gets better. Like right now, I can
Mm.
honestly say that I am so grateful for everyone, all of my followers, all my supporters, and I am just at such a great time in my life that um, I would have never thought I'd be here right now alive. I would never think that, this experience would happen for me in general, these experiences. And I just remember feeling so low, like I had nobody. It gets better. It gets better.
Mhm. No, I can hear the emotion in your voice. What makes you emotional when you think back to this as you're just kind of reliving it? Is it just talking about it?
It's just like feeling, I remember that really dark feeling of feeling like, I had nobody understood, nobody knew what was going on. I remember that feeling so badly. And I remember drowning it with drugs and alcohol, drowning it and ultimately feeling worse, feeling way worse the next day. Horrible, the emotions, everything. And I didn't think I was ever going to pull out of it. I didn't think.
Wow. So you didn't think that it was possible for you.
No.
Mm, that's powerful because I know, Ariana, somebody is listening, and whether it's themselves or a loved one, they don't believe it's possible. They've gotten to a place where they don't know that it can happen for them. And so I think even you just sharing this, that you were at such a low point, but where you are now, girl, is amazing. And you are inspiring people. And you know, the thing I wanted to kind of end with on you, do you see yourself sharing more of your story on your platform? I know you did once where you kind of expressed that. Do you believe maybe today's interview is going to spark more of this, or what do you see next for you in
I
this journey?
I definitely hope so, because there is so much details in, the hardcore addiction. There's so much details in the recovery part of it. People, people I'd like to talk about, experiences, horrible things that happen, and just so many details. And I do want to continue to talk about it, and it's something that I would like to maybe eventually. I do have a YouTube channel, maybe do some more deeper kind of story times on everything that had happened. I would love to.
Mhm. So, well, thank you so much. I want to give you one final statement. Thank you so much, first of all, for being transparent. I know it's hard, even though you go on TikTok in front of millions, to bare your soul is not easy. And so I really, really, really appreciate you being so transparent tonight. And if there was one final word that you want to leave with those who are watching or who may watch this on the replay, what would that be?
It would be, have the ability to love yourself. Find that, as hard as it is, you got to dig deep and just pull it out.
I love that. Find the ability to love yourself. You've dropped so many golden nuggets. You talked about not letting other people define you, finding the ability to love yourself, and knowing that even when it seems hopeless, there is hope. Thank you so much, Ariana, for joining us tonight and sharing your story. Thank you to all of you who've tuned in. And that's going to do it for another episode of Addiction Talk. Bye for
Thank you.
now.